46 men, breathing diesel and sweat, slept above battery cells that turned seawater leaks into clouds of lethal chlorine gas. U-boat crews called their vessels iron coffins for a reason. Death could creep from beneath your bunk or from the air you breathe, not only from the enemy. But what hidden flaw made simply existing inside these submarines a daily gamble with chemical death? The answer begins with a single, devastating design choice. Directly beneath the bunks where U-boat crews tried to sleep, the heart of the submarine pulsed with silent danger. The Type 7C lead-acid batteries, arranged in rows under the living quarters, powered everything from the lights to the engines. Each cell was filled with sulfuric acid, sealed away, yet always present, just a thin deck plate below the men's feet. The batteries were essential, but their placement created a hidden peril. If a hull seam failed or a gasket gave way, seawater could seep into the battery compartment. Salt water mixing with acid triggered a chemical reaction, releasing chlorine gas. This was not a distant hazard. It happened right below where men ate, slept, and waited for orders. Chlorine gas, heavier than air, rose into the crew spaces, burning throats and lungs, and turning the air toxic. Panic spread as men realized there was no quick escape. The only way to vent the gas was to surface, which meant exposing the boat to enemy detection. Even routine battery charging brought risk. As the cells recharged, they gave off hydrogen gas, an invisible threat that could accumulate and cause an explosion if not constantly vented through the hull. Every time the batteries were topped up, the crew depended on fragile ventilation to keep the boat from becoming a bomb. The very technology that made underwater travel possible also turned the submarine into a chemical trap. The men lived and slept above this threat, knowing that a single leak or a failed vent could transform their shelter into a coffin. In the confined darkness, surrounded by steel and acid, survival depended not only on enemy movements, but on the hope that the engineering beneath them would hold for one more day. Inside the steel hull, daily life was a battle against the submarine itself. 44 men squeezed into a cramped space no bigger than a commercial airliner, every inch claimed by machinery, weapons, or the bodies of exhausted sailors. There was only one toilet for the entire crew, and it was a constant source of tension. Long lines formed at all hours, and breakdowns left men desperate or humiliated. For months at sea, there were no showers, just a single cup of water each day for brushing teeth, if that. By the end of a patrol, every man wore the same oil-soaked clothes he'd left port in, skin raw from salt and diesel. Sleep offered little relief. There weren't enough bunks, so men rotated in shifts, slipping into the same warm bedding just vacated by a crewmate. The practice known as hot bunking meant that rest was never truly private or clean. Some men slept wedged between torpedoes, others in the engine room, where temperatures soared past 100 degrees. The constant throb of engines and the vibration of the hull made deep sleep impossible. Noise and heat pressed in from every side. The air was thick with diesel fumes that seeped into every meal. Cocoa and bread tasted of oil, and the smell clung to hair, skin, and lungs. Cigarette smoke mixed with sweat and hydraulic fluid, building a stench so strong that even the food stores turned rancid within days. The lavatory, when it overflowed, filled the boat with a reek like a cholera hospital. Crewmen recalled the unique blend of fried onions from the galley, unwashed bodies, stale air, and the ever-present tang of machinery. Over time, the stench became part of the boat, a sensory reminder that comfort and dignity had no place here. In this environment, every breath, every meal, every moment awake or asleep reinforced the reality that these men lived not in a ship, but in a floating prison, one that could become a grave without warning. Submerged beneath the surface, a U-boat's hatches were locked tighter than any prison door. Water pressure against the hull pressed in with such force that opening a hatch underwater was impossible unless the crew allowed seawater to flood the entire boat, a move that meant certain death for every man inside. The steel shell was both shield and snare. Once a submarine dove, escape routes vanished. The only way out was to surface, but surfacing often meant exposure to enemy ships and aircraft, trading one form of death for another. Of the 859 U-boats that set out on war patrols, 648 never returned. The numbers were unforgiving. In 429 of those sinkings, not a single man survived. Out of 40,000 sailors who went to sea in U-boats, only 10,000 made it home. 3 out of 4 never saw land again. The loss rate, over 75%, was higher than any other branch of the German military. For new recruits, the odds were even worse. A third of all U-boats were lost on their very first patrols, before crews had a chance to learn the rhythms of survival. The hatches that sealed out the ocean also sealed in fate. Once submerged, the men inside were cut off from rescue, from hope, and from the world above. Survival was a matter of mathematics as much as courage, and the numbers offered no comfort. Above the U-boat, the roar of enemy propellers grew louder, a hollow thunder rolling through the steel hull and vibrating in the crew's bones. Every man listened for the rhythm, 10 seconds of silence, then a sudden, crushing detonation as depth charges exploded all around them. The hull groaned and flexed, steel plates shuddering under the force. Inside, the air thickened with sweat and fear. Men gripped pipes and bunks, counting the seconds between blasts, waiting for the next shockwave to split the darkness. The pressure outside pressed inward, making every breath feel thin. Cigarettes, once a comfort, now failed to light, an unspoken warning that oxygen was running out. Lungs burned as chlorine and diesel mixed with the stale air. Some tried to steady their hands, but the pounding above made it impossible. The boat creaked like a dying animal. A single charge within 30 feet could crumple the hull and snuff out every life in an instant. Panic spread in whispers and darting glances. Men weighed the odds of suffocating below against surfacing into gunfire. Sometimes the terror itself forced desperate decisions. Hatches were readied, engines strained, and the order to surface came, not for attack, but for air. In those moments, the U-boat was no longer a weapon. It was a trap, and everyone inside knew it. On April 14, 1945, U-1206 drifted beneath the North Sea, its crew trusting in the latest German engineering to keep them alive. The submarine's greatest innovation, a pressurized toilet designed to function at depth, became the instrument of disaster. Kapitänleutnant Karl Adolf Schlitt attempted to use the complex system without the help of the trained operator. When confusion set in, the specialist was summoned, but a single mistake in the valve sequence let seawater surge backward through the pipes. Within minutes, water and waste flooded down into the battery compartment below. The chemical reaction was immediate. Chlorine gas began to fill the air, invisible and deadly. Kapitänleutnant Schlitt faced an impossible choice. With poison spreading through the boat, he ordered U-1206 to surface. As hatches opened and fans roared to clear the gas, the submarine broke through the waves, directly beneath a British patrol aircraft. Bombs rained down, crippling the vessel and making it impossible to dive again. Schlitt gave the order to scuttle the boat. In heavy seas, 3 men drowned during evacuation, and 46 survivors were pulled from the water and taken prisoner. The submarine slipped beneath the surface, lost not to torpedoes or depth charges, but to a toilet valve and a cascade of human error. A fragment from a crew diary survives. Alarm, chlorine, surface, bombs. The words trail off, unfinished. In the end, the most advanced submarine on the front was undone by the most ordinary of needs, sealing its crew's fate in a final, bitter twist of irony. Today, submarines still seal their crews inside steel hulls, trusting in engineering to keep death at bay. But every advance in technology comes at a human cost. The lesson endures. When we build machines to dominate the deep, we risk turning courage into a calculated sacrifice. Share your thoughts below.